It was a quiet Monday morning when the call came in. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, going through some work emails on my laptop. The house was still, save for the occasional sound of the neighbor's dog barking. My wife, Sarah, had left early for work. She always left a note on the fridge for me, something sweet, or a reminder about picking up groceries. But today, there was no note. Just silence. When my phone buzzed, I glanced at it distractedly. It was Sarah. "Hey, what's up?" I asked, keeping my voice light. There was a pause on the other end, longer than I expected. "I won't be coming home this week," she said. Her voice was calm, too calm. "What? Why?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. My mind was already trying to piece together a reasonable explanation. Maybe an emergency at work, or a trip she forgot to tell me about. "It's just something I need to do," she replied. "I'll explain later." And then she hung up. I sat there for a long moment, staring at my phone. The coffee in my hand had gone cold. Sarah was always straightforward. If there was something wrong, she told me. If there was a problem, we worked through it. But this was unlike her. The calmness in her voice didn't sound like the woman I knew. It felt like something had shifted, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. For the first time in our marriage, I felt the cold grip of suspicion, and I was determined to find out the truth. After Sarah's call, I tried to keep myself busy, but the silence of the house seemed heavier than usual. I couldn't focus on work. Every click of the clock on the wall reminded me that something wasn't right. By lunchtime, I was pacing in the living room, replaying her words in my head. "I won't be coming home this week. It's just something I need to do." What did that even mean? Sarah wasn't one to be cryptic. She was precise, reliable, predictable. I walked into the bedroom, a part of me hoping to find some kind of explanation, maybe a note or a packed bag that would make sense of this. But the room looked the same as it always did, neat and tidy, everything in its place, except for her nightstand drawer. It was slightly ajar, something Sarah never left undone. I hesitated before pulling it open. Inside, it looked as orderly as ever. Her Kindle, a notebook, some old receipts. But something caught my eye. A set of unfamiliar papers peeking out from the corner of her notebook. My heart raced as I unfolded them. They were hotel reservations. The name on the reservation wasn't hers. It was mine. No, not mine. It was her maiden name, which she hadn't used in years. The booking was for a 5-star hotel in the city, and the check-in date was today. I stood there, staring at the paper. My mind raced with questions. Why would Sarah book a room under her old name? And why hadn't she told me? My chest tightened. There was only one way to get answers. I grabbed my jacket, my car keys, and that piece of paper. If Sarah wouldn't come home and explain herself, I'd go to her instead. The drive to the hotel felt longer than it should have. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual, my knuckles white against the leather. The city buzzed around me, indifferent to the storm building inside my chest. By the time I pulled into the hotel parking lot, I had gone through every possible explanation in my mind. Maybe it was a work-related stay. Maybe she needed some time to herself. Maybe there was nothing wrong at all, and I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew better. The lobby was sleek and modern, filled with the kind of quiet luxury that made you feel out of place even when you belonged there. The concierge greeted me with a polite smile as I approached the desk. "Good afternoon, sir. How may I help you?" I slid the reservation paper across the counter. "I believe my wife checked in earlier today. I need to confirm her room number." The concierge's smile didn't falter, but his eyes flicked to the name on the paper. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't give out guest information without proper identification." "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm her husband. This is important." He hesitated, his professionalism wavering for a brief moment. "I can call up to the room for you, if you'd like." I nodded, stepping back as he picked up the phone. My pulse pounded in my ears as I watched him dial. "Hello, Mrs. Shaw," he said after a moment. "Your husband is here in the lobby and—" He froze mid-sentence, his expression stiffening. Then, with a forced smile, he turned his attention back to me. "I'm sorry, sir. She's asked not to be disturbed." I stared at him, my stomach sinking. "What do you mean she doesn't want to be disturbed?" She declined the request, he said, lowering his voice. Perhaps you should try calling her directly. I turned and walked out of the lobby without a word. The crisp afternoon air hit me like a slap to the face as I stood by my car, trying to make sense of what just happened. Sarah knew I was there and told them to send me away. I glanced up at the towering windows of the hotel, my jaw tightening. There was no way I was leaving without answers. The concierge wouldn't help me, but I had other options. The side entrance by the valet wasn't guarded, and if I moved quickly, I could slip in without drawing attention. As I made my way inside, every step felt heavier than the last. Whatever I found in that room would change everything. I could feel it in my bones. And I was ready for the truth, no matter how much it hurt that I found myself standing outside room 1212. The hallway was eerily quiet, the soft hum of the central air the only sound around me. My hand hovered over the door, my mind racing with the possibilities. What was I about to find? I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Sarah? It's me. Open the door. Nothing. I glanced down the hallway, making sure no one was watching. Then, with a deep breath, I turned the handle. Locked, of course. But I wasn't about to give up. I spotted a housekeeper's cart parked a few doors down. Quickly, I grabbed a master key card from the unattended cart, slipping it into the lock. The green light flashed. I pushed the door open. The room was immaculate, its pristine white sheets untouched, the faint scent of fresh linens lingering in the air. But something felt off, too perfect, too staged. And then I saw it. A suitcase sat on the floor near the window. It was hers. The monogrammed initials on the luggage confirmed it. My stomach churned as I moved closer, my hands trembling as I unzipped the bag. Inside was a mix of clothing I recognized, her favorite blouse, the black dress she wore to our anniversary dinner, and items I didn't. Lingerie. The kind she hadn't worn in years. I froze, my fingers brushing against something tucked into the side pocket. A small jewelry box. I pulled it out, flipping it open. Inside was a gold bracelet, engraved with the words, "For the one who stole my heart." The bile rose in my throat as I stared at the inscription. This wasn't from me. The sound of a keycard at the door jolted me. I turned just as the door swung open, and there she was. Sarah froze in the doorway, her eyes wide with shock. "What are you doing here?" I stood, holding up the bracelet. "What is this?" Her face turned pale, her eyes darting toward the suitcase, then back to me. I can explain." "Then explain." I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. She hesitated, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for the right words. But the look on her face told me everything. Guilt, panic, and a flicker of something else, fear. "It's not what you think," she stammered. "Don't insult me," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "You booked a hotel room under your maiden name, you packed lingerie, and now this?" I shook the bracelet in her direction. "Who's it for, Sarah?" She took a step back, her hands trembling. It's for a work friend." "He? Work friend?" I interrupted, my laugh bitter and cold. "You think I'm stupid? You think I can't see what's going on here?" Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't move me. "Please, just let me explain." I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Start talking. Now." Sarah swallowed hard, her voice barely audible as she began to speak. "It's not what you think. I've been unhappy, okay? I didn't know how to tell you." My chest tightened, the air around me feeling heavier with each passing second. "So this is how you handle it? By sneaking around behind my back?" Before she could answer, another sound broke the tension, the muffled buzz of a phone vibrating. It wasn't mine. Sarah's eyes widened as I looked down and spotted her phone on the nightstand. The name flashing on the screen made my blood run cold. "Mark." "Answer it," I said, my voice shaking with fury. Her lips quivered. "Please don't." "Answer it." With trembling hands, she picked up the phone and pressed it to her ear. "Hello?" I watched her closely, every word out of her mouth a knife to my chest. "No, everything's fine. No, don't come up. I'll be down in a minute." She ended the call, her eyes meeting mine. And for the first time in our marriage, I didn't recognize the woman standing in front of me. The air in the room felt suffocating. Sarah stood there, clutching her phone as if it could shield her from the storm brewing between us. I could feel the tension radiating off her, her guilt as palpable as the knot tightening in my chest. Mark. I spat the name like it was poison. Who is he? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her silence was louder than any explanation she could offer. Who is he? I repeated, my voice low and steady, though my hands trembled at my sides. He's just someone from work, she stammered, her voice barely audible. It's not what you think. Not what I think. I scoffed, my laugh bitter and hollow. So he's not the one who stole your heart? He's not the reason you've been sneaking off, lying to me? I held up the bracelet again, its glint under the hotel room's harsh light mocking me. Her face crumpled, tears spilling over her cheeks. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't plan it. Stop. I cut her off, my voice sharp. Don't you dare try to justify this. Don't you dare act like this just happened. You made choices, Sarah. You chose to betray me. She looked away, her shoulders shaking as she cried. But her tears didn't move me. Not this time. How long? I asked. What? She whispered, her voice barely audible. How long has this been going on? I demanded, my anger rising with each second she didn't answer. Sarah hesitated, her lip trembling. 3 months, she finally admitted, her voice so soft I almost didn't hear it. 3 months. 90 days of lies, of sneaking around, of looking me in the eyes and pretending nothing was wrong. And what? You thought you could keep this up forever? I asked, my voice dripping with contempt. No, she said quickly, shaking her head. I was going to end it. I swear. I didn't know how. How? I repeated, stepping closer. You didn't know how to stop betraying your husband? You didn't know how to walk away from someone else's bed and come home to the man who's loved and supported you? Her sobs grew louder, but I couldn't stop now. The dam had broken, and every word I'd been holding back came flooding out. Was he worth it? I asked, my voice cold. Was he worth throwing away everything we've built together? Sarah looked at me then, her tear-streaked face a mixture of pain and desperation. It wasn't like that, she said, her voice pleading. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I laughed, a harsh, hollow sound. You weren't trying to hurt me? You lied to me. You betrayed me. And now you're standing here, expecting me to believe you didn't mean for it to hurt? She reached out as if to touch me, but I stepped back, putting space between us. Don't, I warned. You don't get to play the victim here. Her hand dropped, and for a moment, she just stood there, silent and broken. I'll fix this, she whispered. I'll end it. I'll do whatever it takes. Please, just let me fix this. But her words rang hollow in my ears. Fix this? How do you fix something that's already been shattered beyond repair? I'm going to find Mark, I said, my voice icy. And we're going to have a little chat. Sarah's eyes widened in panic. No, please. Don't do that. It's not his fault. Not his fault, I snapped. He's sleeping with another man's wife. He knew exactly what he was doing. You both did. I turned toward the door, my mind made up. But before I could leave, Sarah grabbed my arm, desperation in her voice. Please, she begged. If you ever loved me, don't do this. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back up at her tear-streaked face. Don't talk to me about love, I said, my voice cold and unyielding. You killed that the moment you let him into your life. I shook her hand off and walked out of the room, leaving her sobbing behind me. The hallway outside Sarah's room was silent as I marched toward the elevator, anger and betrayal fueling every step. I didn't know what I'd say when I found Mark, but I knew I couldn't leave without confronting him. The elevator ride down felt agonizingly slow, my mind racing as I pictured the man who had inserted himself into my life, into my marriage. I didn't care about appearances anymore. If the hotel staff noticed the fury on my face, they wisely said nothing. When the elevator doors slid open to the lobby, I scanned the room, my eyes darting over business people, tourists, and families. Then, near the bar, I spotted him. Mark. He wasn't hard to recognize. His cocky grin, perfectly tailored suit, and relaxed posture screamed confidence, the kind that made my blood boil. He was seated at the bar, casually sipping a drink, oblivious to the storm heading his way. I crossed the room, my footsteps echoing on the marble floor. He didn't notice me until I was standing right behind him. "Mark," I said, my voice low but laced with steel. He turned, his smile faltering for a split second before it returned, sharper now. He looked me up and down, as if sizing me up. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone casual, but there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "You know exactly who I am," I said, stepping closer. His smirk widened. "Ah, the husband," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I was wondering when we'd meet." I clenched my fists, every fiber of my being screaming at me to knock that smug look off his face. But I held back. "Barely. You think this is funny?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. He shrugged, setting his drink down. "Not funny, no. But inevitable? Maybe." "Inevitable?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You think it was inevitable to sleep with another man's wife? To tear apart a marriage?" Mark leaned forward, resting his elbows on the bar. "Look, man, I'm not the one who's unhappy at home. If Sarah was content, we wouldn't be having this conversation." The audacity of his words hit me like a slap. My hands tightened into fists, and for a moment, I was sure I'd lose control. But I forced myself to take a deep breath. "You think that excuses what you've done?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. "You think that makes you any less of a snake?" Mark's smirk wavered slightly, but he quickly recovered, his tone dripping with condescension. "I'm not here to make excuses. She came to me, not the other way around." I leaned in, my voice a cold whisper. "You might think you've won, but you have no idea who you're messing with. This isn't over." Mark raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Big talk, but I'm not scared of you." "You will be," I said, straightening up. "You've taken something from me, and I promise you'll regret it." With that, I turned and walked away, my heart pounding as adrenaline coursed through me. I didn't need to stoop to his level here, in public. My revenge would be calculated, precise, and unforgettable. As I walked out of the hotel, the cool evening air hit me like a splash of cold water, but it did little to calm the storm raging inside me. Mark's smug face, his dismissive words, Sarah's betrayal. They swirled in my mind, leaving no room for anything else. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was determined. Mark thought he'd won. Sarah thought she could lie to my face and get away with it. They both underestimated me. They saw my quiet nature, my patience, as weakness. That was their first mistake. I got into my car and sat there, staring at the steering wheel, my mind racing. This wasn't just about confronting Sarah or exposing Mark. That would be too easy. No, they needed to understand the depth of what they'd done, the gravity of the choices they'd made. And they would. I opened my phone and started making calls. The first was to a private investigator I'd used once before, years ago, to vet a business partner who had turned out to be shady. His name was Greg, and he had a reputation for being thorough. "Greg," I said when he answered, his gruff voice on the other end immediately putting me at ease. "I've got a job for you." "Long time, no talk," he said. "What's the job?" I hesitated for only a moment before diving in. "I need everything you can find on a man named Mark Hale. I'll send you his details. And while you're at it, I need you to look into my wife." Greg didn't miss a beat. "Got it. How far back do you want me to go?" "As far as it takes to find something I can use," I replied, my voice firm. "This is personal, Greg. I want every skeleton in their closets." "Understood," he said. "I'll get started tonight." The second call was to my lawyer, Andrew. We'd known each other since college, and while I'd never needed him for anything serious, I trusted him to handle this delicately. "Andrew," I said, my voice steady despite the rage boiling beneath the surface, "I need to prepare for a divorce." There was a pause on the line. "I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything I should know?" "Yes," I said. Infidelity. And I want to make sure I come out of this clean. No loose ends, no leverage for her to use against me. Can you help me with that? Of course, Andrew said. I'll draft a plan and start gathering everything we'll need. Do you have proof of the infidelity? I will soon, I replied, thinking of Greg's impending investigation. By the time I hung up the phone, the pieces of my plan were starting to come together. But I wasn't done yet. I pulled out a notebook from the glove compartment, something I used to jot down ideas for work, and started writing. Every detail, every step, every possible move they could make and how I'd counter it. It all went into that notebook. They thought they'd caught me off guard, but they didn't know me. Not really. This wasn't just about ending things. It was about making sure neither of them ever forgot what they'd done to me. The next few days passed in a tense blur. I avoided Sarah as much as possible, retreating to the guest room at night and keeping our conversations brief. She knew better than to press me, and I wasn't ready to listen to her excuses. But I didn't waste a single moment. Greg was quick to deliver. On the third evening, he called with his initial findings. I've got some dirt on your boy Mark Hale, Greg said, his voice crackling through the phone. Turns out he's no stranger to stepping on other people's lives. What do you mean? I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. Well, for starters, this isn't his first affair, Greg said. I found at least 2 other women in the last 5 years, both married, both left their husbands because of him. The guy's a predator, plain and simple. I clenched my jaw, the anger surging again. Anything else? Plenty, Greg continued. His finances are a mess. He's drowning in debt, mostly from bad investments and gambling. The guy's been coasting on charm and other people's money for years. Oh, and he's got a couple of assault charges on his record. Nothing recent, but it's a pattern worth noting. I leaned back in my chair, letting it all sink in. Mark wasn't just an opportunist. He was a leech. He used people, drained them, and then moved on. And now he had his sights set on my wife. Anything on Sarah? I asked, though I wasn't sure I was ready for the answer. Greg hesitated. Not as much yet, but I'm still digging. There's no record of her having done this before, but her phone records show a lot of communication with Mark over the last few months. Texts, calls, even late-night video chats. I swallowed hard, the betrayal hitting me again like a fresh wound. Keep digging, I said. Will do, Greg replied. I'll send you a full report by the end of the week. When I hung up, I stared at the wall for a long time, my thoughts swirling. Mark wasn't just some fling. He was dangerous, manipulative, and toxic. And Sarah, whether she realized it or not, had been pulled into his orbit. That night, while Sarah slept in the master bedroom, I opened her laptop. I knew her passwords. She hadn't changed them in years. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Emails. Dozens of them. Some were mundane, work-related exchanges and family updates. But buried among them were messages from Mark. They weren't just flirtatious. They were plans. Late-night rendezvous. Inside jokes. And in one message, an attachment. A plane ticket for a weekend getaway that hadn't yet happened. I read every word, my chest tightening with each line. The evidence was clear, undeniable. But as I read through Mark's messages, I noticed something else. He wasn't just playing Sarah. He was setting her up. He'd made subtle mentions of splitting assets, selling the house, and starting fresh together. It wasn't love. It was a con. I sat back, the pieces falling into place. Mark wasn't just after Sarah. He was after everything we'd built together. And he thought I wouldn't see it coming. But he was wrong. If Mark wanted to play games, I'd make sure he lost. Armed with everything Greg had uncovered, I felt the gears of my plan clicking into place. Mark was a predator. A man who relied on charm to worm his way into people's lives and take what he wanted. But predators have blind spots. They never expect their prey to fight back. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to dismantle his game piece by piece. The next morning, Sarah acted as if everything was normal, as if we were just another couple navigating a bump in the road. She made coffee and offered me a strained smile when I entered the kitchen. "How did you sleep?" she asked, her voice tentative. "Fine," I said curtly, grabbing my mug. I didn't sit down. She hesitated, chewing her lip. "I was thinking maybe we could talk tonight. About everything." I know I hurt you, but I want to fix this. Talk? I repeated, meeting her gaze. Sure. Let's talk tonight. The guilt in her eyes was obvious, but I didn't flinch. I needed her to believe I was still processing my emotions, still on the fence about what to do. It would buy me the time I needed. That afternoon, I contacted Greg again. How quickly can you send me everything you've found on Mark? It's all ready, Greg said. I can send it to you now. You sure you're ready for this? I've never been more ready, I replied. The email landed in my inbox moments later. Mark's financial records, details of his past affairs, and photos of him with Sarah. Every damning piece of evidence was meticulously organized, leaving no room for doubt. I forwarded the file to Andrew, my lawyer, with a single line. Prepare everything. We're going to war. But that wasn't enough. I needed to confront Mark on his turf, where he thought he was untouchable. Greg had tracked down the address of a dingy office Mark operated out of, a front for his so-called consulting business. That's where I'd start. Later that evening, as Sarah busied herself upstairs, I grabbed my keys and left the house without a word. The office was exactly what I'd imagined. Run down, with peeling paint on the walls and a cheap sign on the door that read, Hale Consulting. I stepped inside, the air stale and heavy. Mark was there, sitting at a desk cluttered with papers and an old laptop. He looked up, surprised, but quickly masked it with his signature smirk. Well, if it isn't the husband, he said, leaning back in his chair. What can I do for you tonight? I closed the door behind me, locking it with a deliberate click. We need to talk. Mark raised an eyebrow, feigning nonchalance. Talk about what? Sarah? I think we've already covered that. No, I said, stepping closer. We're going to talk about you. About the lies you've told, the women you've conned, the money you've stolen. We're going to talk about how this ends for you. Mark's smirk faltered. I don't know what you think you've got, but... I tossed a folder onto his desk, cutting him off. Inside were copies of Greg's findings, his financial failures, his criminal record, and photos of him with Sarah. His face darkened as he flipped through the pages. You've been digging into my life? You made the mistake of involving me, I said, my voice calm but firm. Now I'm involved. And I'm not walking away until I've made sure you have nothing left. Mark slammed the folder shut, standing up abruptly. You think you're some kind of tough guy? You don't scare me. I leaned in, meeting his glare with one of my own. You should be scared. You've been sloppy, Mark. You left a trail, and now I have everything I need to ruin you. Your debt, your scams, your dirty little affairs. It's all going public unless you disappear. You leave Sarah, me, and my life alone. Permanently. His bravado cracked for a split second, his confidence wavering. You think I'm just going to walk away? I think you don't have a choice, I said, stepping back. And if you even think about going after Sarah again, I'll make sure you don't just lose everything. You'll end up behind bars. I turned and walked out of the office, leaving Mark to stew in his own mess. As I stepped into the cool night air, I felt a small flicker of satisfaction. The trap was set, and soon, he'd see just how far I was willing to go to protect what was mine. I returned home late that night, the tension in my chest finally loosening after my confrontation with Mark. But this wasn't over, not yet. I still had to deal with Sarah. When I walked through the door, she was waiting for me in the living room, her face pale and drawn. You were gone for hours, she said, her voice trembling. Where were you? I shrugged, setting my keys on the counter, clearing my head. She stood, wringing her hands. I think we should talk. Please, just sit down and let me explain. I stared at her, my expression unreadable. Then, slowly, I sat on the couch across from her. She took a deep breath, as if gathering her courage. I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you, and I'll never forgive myself for it. But I didn't mean for it to happen like this. Mark, he made me feel seen, and I held up a hand, cutting her off. Stop. Don't blame this on Mark. You made a choice, Sarah. You made the choice to betray me, to lie to me, to throw away everything we built together. Tears streamed down her face, but I felt no sympathy. Not anymore. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I'll cut him off. I'll go to therapy. Please, just give me a chance to fix this. I leaned forward, my voice cold. You don't fix something like this, Sarah. You shattered it. And now, we deal with the fallout. Her sobs grew louder, but I stood, walking away before she could see the pain on my face. The next day, I began phase 2 of my plan. Mark thought he could slink away quietly, but I wasn't going to let him off the hook that easily. I compiled everything Greg had uncovered and sent it anonymously to key figures in Mark's professional life. Clients, colleagues, even his landlord. By the end of the day, whispers of his financial misconduct and predatory behavior began circulating. It wasn't long before the fallout hit. Mark's consulting gig evaporated overnight. His landlord issued an eviction notice, citing unpaid rent, and his remaining clients severed ties, refusing to associate with a man whose reputation was now in tatters. But I wasn't done. I scheduled a meeting with Sarah that evening, handing her the divorce papers Andrew had prepared. She stared at them, her hands shaking. You're really doing this? Yes, I said, my voice steady. I deserve better than this, Sarah. You destroyed our marriage. Now you can deal with the consequences. Mark called me 3 days later, his voice laced with desperation. You've ruined my life, he hissed. My job, my clients, everything's gone. Do you have any idea what you've done? I smiled coldly, leaning back in my chair. I've done exactly what you deserve. You thought you could take everything from me and walk away unscathed? You were wrong. He tried to threaten me, but I cut him off. This is just the beginning, Mark. If you so much as look at Sarah again, I'll make sure you lose what little you have left. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, the line went dead. Sarah moved out a week later. The divorce proceedings were swift, thanks to the ironclad case Andrew and Greg had built. The evidence of her affair left her with no leverage, and I ensured that I retained everything. Our home, our savings, and my dignity. She wrote me a letter before she left, apologizing for everything and begging for forgiveness. I didn't respond. Some wounds don't heal with words. The weeks that followed were hard, but they were also liberating. The weight of Sarah's betrayal no longer suffocated me. I threw myself into my work, reconnected with old friends, and started rebuilding the life I thought I'd lost. One night, Greg called me with an update. Mark's out of the picture, he said. Rumor is he left town. Couldn't handle the heat. Good, I replied, my voice calm. Let him run. He won't escape what he's done. Months later, I found myself sitting in a cafe, sipping coffee as the world moved on around me. For the first time in what felt like years, I felt at peace. I had lost Sarah, but I'd found something more important, myself. Mark's life was in ruins, Sarah's regret followed her like a shadow, and I had emerged stronger, sharper, and more determined than ever. They thought they could break me. Instead, I rose from the ashes, unbroken and unrelenting. Revenge wasn't just about destroying them. It was about reclaiming my power. And I had done just that.